Hey y'all, as you come in, please say hello. I was trying to get my Zoom connected to Facebook, but it wouldn't connect for whatever reason, so I'm just gonna have to do it live. I hope you all can still join in the conversation here. Today we're talking about Psalms 38 and 39. Hope everyone is getting through these readings. I know it's a lot to keep up with. It's kind of hard to focus during this time, at least for me. And there's just a lot going on. So if you've fallen behind, please, you can just get back on track. If you can't catch up, that's fine. Just join back up where we are and keep going. It's not about perfection, and it's not about finishing, at all. I just want the word to get out there. If you can complete the full 90 days, that's amazing. But if you fall off and have to get back on, there's no shame in that. So, all right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to go ahead and read Psalm 38 from the NIV. And then as we go, if you have any revelations or comments, please share them, and I will stop to answer or to discuss. All right, so Psalm 38 from the NIV. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Your arrows have pierced me, and your hand has come down on me. Because of your wrath, there is no health in my body. There is no soundness in my bones because of my sin. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and are loathsome because of my sinful folly. I am bowed down and brought very low. All day long I go about mourning. My back is filled with searing pain. There is no health in my body. I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. All my longings lie open before you, Lord. My sighing is not hidden from you. My heart pounds. My strength fails me. Even the light has gone from my eyes. My friends and companions avoid me because of my wounds. My neighbors stay far away. Those who want to kill me set their traps. Those who would harm me talk of my ruin. All day long they scheme and lie. I am like the deaf who cannot hear, like the mute who cannot speak. I have become like one who does not hear, whose mouth can offer no reply. Lord, I wait for you. You will answer, Lord my God. For I said, do not let them gloat or exalt themselves over me when my feet slip. For I am about to fall, and my pain is ever with me. I confess my iniquity. I am troubled by my sin. Many have become my enemies without cause. Those who hate me without reason are numerous. Those who repay my good with evil lodge accusations against me, though I seek only to do what is good. Lord, do not forsake me. Do not be far from me, my God. Come quickly to help me, my Lord and Savior. All right, hi everyone who's joined. My Zoom wasn't working, so I just had to hop on here quickly. So if you have any comments or revelations you want to share, please do, and we can discuss it through this. Hey, Kim. All right, so I just got done reading Psalm 38, and I read from the NIV version. So this is a petition psalm. It's a psalm of repentance and forgiveness. This has kind of a theological. I don't want to say it could spark a theological debate, right? About whether or not God punishes people or if sin causes people to be sick. So from my point of view, I have my own thoughts and feelings about this, but other people may have something completely different. For me, reading this psalm, I have a lot of empathy for David. What he's saying here is basically that his sin is causing his bodily condition. We do know that David did suffer from some sort of like arthritis. I think it might have been osteoarthritis. some sort of sickness in his body where he actually did have physical pain, and whether or not that was caused by sin is left up for debate, right? There's examples in the Bible of both, right? Like an example would be the man at the pool. After he was healed, Jesus said, "Go and sin no more." So there's kind of an indication that his physical well-being was connected to his sin. But then you have in John, when Jesus heals the blind man, they're asking Jesus who sinned, this man or his parents, and Jesus says none. He was made this way so that God could be glorified in him. So this psalm, like the basis of it, is hard to grasp for us because some people are on one side of it and other people on the other. But I think that there's value in it anyway, even if we aren't talking about sickness, even if we're just talking about the human condition, this still is relevant. And we don't have to get caught up in the debate to get out of this what kind of the theme is. And really, it's having a heart to seek God, even in the midst of your suffering. Having a heart to question God, not out of a doubting place, but out of a I want to do better place. And I think that it's natural. Maybe we don't talk about it a lot because we don't want we don't want to be looked at a certain way, but I'll just speak for myself that there have been times when I'm going through stuff when I am questioning what I did wrong to deserve the place that I was in. Especially like being completely transparent, like with my illness. When it was at its worst, I was sure that I was like doing something really wrong to be where I was. And there have been parts in my life where I do think that God was like rebuking me and I had to go through some things for that. But I also know that God is a God of love and that it's not always a result of what we're doing or what we have done when we're going through things. It's just something that has to be done for God to get you to where you need to be, right? So I think too, this is a message of humbling yourself, of being brought low, and how we're supposed to act during those times, even though David is very human in this, and we feel, at least I empathize with David. I understand what it feels like to be at the lowest low and not really know what's going on and not understanding how to get out of it, not knowing what I have to do to make things better. So it's almost like that's, I don't want to say it's stuck between a rock and a hard place, but it's almost just that place of feeling helpless, but wanting to be able to do something to get yourself out of this situation. Okay, Kim says, dealing with his sickness and pain, asking God for mercy because of what he had did. He kept asking God to help him. It can be the condition of our hearts and asking God to make me better. Did I make a decision? Please show me, God. Exactly. I think too that this also shows that no matter what our conditions are, no matter what, if we're experience sickness, if we're just in this like pit of despair, we still need to seek God. And I think David gives an example here of how we can approach God in a way that isn't slandering him. It's not even putting our own faith to shame. It's just being like, God, I don't know what to do. If I'm the cause of this, help, show me what I need to do. If there's something else, I'm praying for it now. I just am coming to you because you're the only person who can help me through this. Jonathan says it's natural to think that we are the ones who cause challenges we experience. It takes a strong relationship with God to realize that isn't necessarily the case. Exactly. But I think this is also a building of faith through this, that we get to understand God in a new way. And I think it's during situations like this, if we are placed in a situation like this where we aren't sure of what God is doing, we aren't sure if we placed ourselves in that position, it's a place where we can go to God and get personal direction from Him. And it also teaches us to wait for the answer that we are searching for. Again, just going from my own perspective, it was during the times when I was feeling the worst that God really began speaking to me about the condition I was in. I was able to gain clarity about how I was feeling, why I was feeling, and what was coming out of this. But had I not been in the desperate situation where I'm really questioning everything I'm doing, I'm questioning everything God is doing, then I wouldn't have been able to come out on the other side with an answer. And I think the answer we look for is in that desperate place. We just have to be willing to look for it. Like, it's real easy to get caught up in the poor me, why am I going through this, and miss the God, show me what this is about. And David, I think that's kind of what David is like alluding to here. I know it's not on purpose, but just the finding an answer from God, seeking his purpose in it, can reveal so much about His plan for your entire life. Not just for what is happening in the here and now, but it's those desperate places that are a turning point in our lives, that God will use that to direct us and use it to get us to shift into another way of thinking. So if you have any other revelations, please share it. But I'm going to go ahead and go into Psalm 39. And I am reading from the Living Bible for this one. I said to myself, I'm going to quit complaining. I'll keep quiet, especially when the ungodly are around me. But as soon as I stood there silently, the turmoil within me grew to the bursting point. The more I mused, the hotter the fires inside. Then at last, I spoke and pled with God. Lord, help me to realize how brief my time on earth will be. Help me to know that I am here for but a moment more. My life is no longer than my hand. My whole lifetime is but a moment to you. Proud man, frail as breath, a shadow, and all his busy rushing ends in nothing. He heaps up riches for someone else to spend. And so, Lord, my only hope is in you. Save me from being overpowered by my sins, for even fools will mock me then. Lord, I am speechless before you. I will not open my mouth to speak one word of complaint, for my punishment is from you. Lord, don't hit me anymore. I am exhausted beneath your hand. When you punish a man for his sins, he is destroyed, for he is as fragile as a moth-infested cloth. Yes, man is frail as breath. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Listen to my cry. Don't sit back, unmindful of my tears, for I am your guest. I am a traveler passing through the earth as all my fathers were. Spare me, Lord. Let me recover and be filled with happiness again before my death. So when I reread this psalm, it just had a different feel to it, given the times that we're in. I think we're facing mortality in a new way. We're realizing that the status quo was really not serving us the way that we thought it was. We start to realize, we start to think about what our time here on earth means and what we're actually doing with our time. Are we being fruitful? Were we just wasting our time? And I think that this psalm just hits home right now for me. I think too that there's so much going on in the world right now that we have to remember too that this is just but a moment, not only in our lives, but in God's eyes. 1,000 years pass in the span of a day. So what we're going through right now, yes, it's important, and yes, it has impact, but we also need to look at the bigger picture of our lives and kind of just take what we can from this and move forward, because our life is so short, because our life is fleeting. What can we take from this and move on with? What can we grab a hold of and make sure that we are walking on the right path once we get back into kind of a routine? Originally, I had seen this as a psalm that was just more a repentant psalm, like asking for forgiveness. But as I read it and read it over again, I just see a vulnerable David. I always say that like the Psalms talk about our humanness, but this is a different perspective that we don't always get. He says, like, don't sit back unmindful of my tears. Just like, God, what am I really doing here? What really is my purpose here? When I try to not say anything, it starts to burn within me. But I don't want to say the wrong thing and get, so that I end up in a bad position. Right, Kim? Like, how fragile can our life be, right? Like, we see it right now. Being busy or productive. Kim, I think about that a lot. We all have a busy part of ourselves, and sometimes it's just masking other things. It could be masking anxiety, masking whatever it may be, and that this time is showing us maybe what we're really doing when we're busying ourselves with all the things in life. Like, did we really need to do that, or was that just our own ways of compensating for something that we're missing? It's a funeral psalm. I can definitely see that this would be a funeral psalm because it has that feel to it. But I think, again, this goes back to what the Psalms represent and what's at the core of them, that there is this hopelessness in this psalm. It like permeates it. Even if you aren't really feeling the words, you can kind of grasp it just by looking at the sentences and how they're set up. And in the middle of it, like almost smack dab in the middle, you have David declaring that he has hope in the Lord. And what a metaphor, just in the format of the psalm, that in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the hopelessness, there is this like ball of hope sitting there. And the only hope that is fail-proof, the only hope that is going to last through it all is the hope in God. And so you're kind of looking at it from this perspective, that there's the one hope in the middle of all hopelessness. And so it's, again, a faith that we all strive for. That in the middle of isolation or in the middle of quarantine, we can still have hope. And the hope doesn't have to be necessarily hope in what will happen when we come out of quarantine, but the hope is in God and what God is doing. And the hope is that even though this is all fleeting, even though our lives are but a breath, that we have a hope that sustains us through this life and into eternal life. And I think for me, in the worst moment, we still have to have hope in God. And I think for a long time, for me, I couldn't grasp what having hope in God really meant. Because I was attaching hope in God to hope in concrete things. So if we're holding on to the hope that things are going to get better and that, all of this will disappear and that no one in our family will be touched by this, kind of hope in a return to the normal. It's okay to have hope in those things, but if our hope isn't grounded in God first, then if any of those things fail, what hope are we going to have? And it goes back to Romans when Paul says, hope that is seen is no hope at all. So it's like we know that better days are ahead of us. We know that things will get better. We know that things will kind of come back to a new normal, but we aren't going to stay in this quarantine forever, right? That's basically a fact. So when we put our hope in those things, is it really hope? Or is it just like an anticipation? Is it more of I'm holding on because I know this is going to happen? Versus a hope in God, which we can't even imagine, we can't even comprehend what God is doing. That hope is a hope that will be steady. It's a firm foundation of hope. And that's where our faith comes into play. And so when we are in situations like this, if we can place our hope in God, and really in God and what God is doing, then our faith is building. And as our faith is building, we have more hope. It's like a cycle. But I think the place where we lose it is when we start putting our hope in the wrong places. I just repeated myself, but I think too, in talking about both of these Psalms, the seeking of God is the pulling out of the desperate place. So it's not necessarily in God's answer, because there isn't really an answer in these Psalms. Right? There's no reply from God in these Psalms. So as David is doing all of this questioning, as David is pondering all of these things, he's wondering, he's realizing the fragility of life. He's realizing the fleeting things of this life, that he's actually pulling himself out of where he is, out of the pit, as he's questioning these things, as he's seeking God on these things. So I see these more about the process than about the end result. Because in a lot of the Psalms, when David is talking about his battles, we know the answer or there's some sort of reply within them. But for Psalms that leave it open-ended, which oftentimes come across as like kind of being depressing or pessimistic, I think those leave us with the thoughts of what will God do and what will happen in the wait while all this is coming to pass. So when I see people or hear people say, you don't question God, well then what are you learning about God? What are you learning about yourself? Where do you have the answers to the most difficult parts in your life? Because without questioning these things, without wondering what is my life for? What am I doing in this short time span that I have here on earth? Then what are you producing? What are you gaining? And then how is God being glorified out of it? I think as we question things and as we wonder about the meaning of life, we know that we have meaning. We know that we're here to glorify God. We know that we have purpose. But it's the questioning in attaining that purpose. It's the wondering, am I doing it right? It's the wondering, am I doing it wrong? And am I being punished for it? Those are the things that get you to where you need to be. And I guess some people, most people, I don't know why I said some, but we want to skip that part. Like, no one wants to be in a place where they're questioning God if they've sinned so much that that's why they're sick. Or, that we're in such a terrible place that all we can think about is death and how short this life is. Like, no one wants to be in that place. But those are the places that we get the answers. And those are the places that we find the purpose, and those are the places that we get to know God better. There's no point in my life where I've gotten to know God better and I've gotten to know my purpose more than when I was in a terrible place. And I guess you could say most of the Psalms, like David is not in the best of places, at least the Davidic Psalms. Even the ones further on, when we talk about the national mourning psalms during the exile in Babylon, was when you see the hope really come forward. Like, if I go back to talking about the word hope coming in the middle of this psalm, in verse 7, it says, "And so, Lord, my only hope is you." It's darkness around the 7th verse. And if that darkness wasn't there, would the 7th verse pop out at us as much as it does? So I think that David knew something and learned something that a lot of us don't want to do. He understood the value of being in that terrible place. And it didn't feel good, which was why he was crying out to God. and it didn't, it didn't look good. It didn't even sound good in some form. But the power that it has, just the release that brought about an ability to say, but I still have hope in you. And I also grasp kind of from what David is saying, that sometimes you have to pour out in order to receive the hope. Hey, Denise. Right? Sometimes we have to get rid of all of the stuff we're holding in. Like he's talking about here, I tried to stay silent. But there was this despair. And so are we holding things into the point where we can't even express any hope because we're just trying to hold it all together? That if we open our mouth, it's all going to spill out. Versus letting our feelings come out, letting our questions come out, letting our fears and our despair come out, and then being able to take a deep breath and say, but I have hope in you, Lord. And to me, it's just, okay, maybe I'm like dark and twisted, but these are the Psalms that to me are the most powerful. Right, Denise, despite everything, I still have hope in you. But let me get this out again. Let me get this out again, that life is fleeting. I sometimes don't know like why I'm here. I sometimes don't understand or can't grasp the shortness of my life. I'm not feeling it right now, basically. But I still have hope. This psalm doesn't really end on a happy note. Like a lot of the psalms will say, but yet I will praise the Lord. And he's just saying, spare me, Lord. Let me recover and be filled with happiness again before my death. Like, please, God, do something. I don't want to die in this emotion. I don't want to die in my despair. I don't want to die sad and lonely. So just bring me happiness again. And that right there is about as honest and powerful as you can get. I don't want to die miserable. Help me, God, to find joy. Give me some sort of joy, happiness. Denise, yeah. I actually both of these psalms were pretty they're pretty hard to get through. Especially, I was saying earlier, during this time they take on completely new meanings. So that's basically all I have for these. If anyone else has any other comments or revelations, please let me know. I was just rereading verse 10. Because when I read it again, it just struck me. Lord, don't hit me anymore. I'm exhausted beneath your hand. He says, I'm speechless. My life is no longer than my hand. It is intense, yeah. Right. I identify so much too when he's talking about, I'm just gonna keep quiet. Like, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna complain. I'm just gonna keep everything to myself. But then it starts, like he's saying, it bubbles over to the point where you just, he says it's like hotter than fires inside. like we let it sit in us until we can't hold it in, and then we end up lashing out at everyone, right? We end up doing things that we normally wouldn't just because we wanted to stop complaining. I don't want it to end with this feeling, nor do I want to continue living in unhappiness. Exactly. There's just no, I think during this time too, like, there's no reason to hold back anymore. There should be a freedom during this season, because we can do it in kind of the privacy of our own homes. We don't have to wait till we're at church to do it. We don't have to kind of stifle our tears because we don't want to seem overly emotional in church or whatever it might be. This is a good time to just let it all out. Like, God doesn't know already what you're dealing with. But the freedom that comes with being able to spill it all out it's just unexplainable. And we shouldn't keep quiet. We shouldn't keep quiet at all. At all. Nicole, I don't know how to release. Yeah. I understand that completely. I understand that, especially how we operate as, just speaking from most of the people here, as women, as mothers, especially as a single mother, speaking to you personally, that we are taught and we hold stuff in so often that we don't even know how to let it all out, because the strong woman, the strong leader tells us not to do those things. And also, I will say that we've been taught not to complain to God. I don't know about you, but unless it's a psalm of praise, I see complaining. So I think it's a stripping down process. I think it's a letting go of all past notions process. Right, like Kim said, it's about being vulnerable. And it's so hard. See, I think sometimes we see our alone time with God as almost public. Like, it's our time with Him, but it's almost like it's being viewed by someone. I don't know if that makes sense. So sometimes, even though we have shut the door and when we're in our own space, it doesn't, what am I trying to say? It doesn't feel like you're alone. Like, I think we have to cut off everything, and truly know how to sit alone. And for me, one of the hardest things I had to learn was to just sit in silence with God. And just cry. and not wait for an answer. Just sit in silence. No anticipating anything, no, God, I need to hear from you, just sitting there. And then that's when everything started pouring out. Denise says journaling. That's good. I'm not a journaler personally. I start and then I stop. But that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like, David was writing these, was speaking these in his own private space. So that it was obviously a release for him to do this kind of thing. Yeah. I think what we often do is we shut down as a response to not wanting to be vulnerable until it all builds up, and then it pours out into other areas, and then we've made a mess, and that's then when we go to God and we say, I can't believe I'm at this place, I can't believe this is where I am, versus taking everything that we're holding in and pouring it out to God first, and then avoiding the overflow that would have happened had we not just released it to God. So, back to the complaining part too. Like, who said we can't complain to God? You can still be grateful about your life. You can still be grateful about something and want things to be better. And I think we have to get rid of, I'm not speaking to anyone in particular here, but it's also a pride thing. Like, I love God too much to complain. Or I'm so grateful for what I have. Why would I even complain? Well, you're complaining because you're not where you're at, where you want to be. And you're not where God wants you to be. You're complaining because you know that there's something better out there. You know that God has something better planned. So it's not really a complaint. It's saying, God, there's more to this. God, this is not what I thought it would be. God, this is not, where I think that you want me to be. So help me get there. Then he said, I do too, Amanda, but it's the only place I can yell and scream. Yeah. Yes. I completely understand that. The journaling is kind of like an internal screaming. I completely get that. God knows how we really feel anyway. Yep. All of that. And again, going back to, sometimes I think we talk ourselves out of our own feelings, but in a good way. Like, a lot of times David will be crying out to God, seeking God for all these things, and he'll end up on a note of praise because he's recalling things that God has done as he's letting these things out. Like, if I'm talking to God and I'm saying, God, I can't do this quarantine anymore. I'm losing my mind. I feel shut in. I feel like I'm trapped here. I feel like this is never going to end. And as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, wait a minute, like, this is how I felt when I was sick in my bed and couldn't get up. This is how I felt. This is how I feel in illness that I can't get out of. And then I start remembering, but God, you have sustained me through all of that. You have given me all I've needed to get through. So then I can come back to where I'm at and be like, you know what, God, I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to praise you. I'm going to put my hope in you because I have just reminded myself through pouring it out of who you are and what you've done for me. So it's like internal dialogue coming to life. And God will always guide you to that point anyway, if you're, pouring your heart out to him. So yeah. Thank you all for your conversation. If there's anything more, please let me know. This was awesome. I appreciate everyone's honesty and vulnerability on here. I love honest conversation, especially when it comes to the word. We don't have to be religious or deep. We can just talk about what people feel and what people feel about the word too. So, all right, y'all, cool. Everyone go ahead, get your rest tonight. I'll be back here live next week. I'm going to hopefully be able to get Zoom connected to Facebook so we can do another conversation like that. But otherwise, if you are falling behind, don't worry. Go ahead, catch up, or just hop back on where we are now. I always say it, there's no shame. This is just about getting into the word. So if you feel condemnation about not reading the word, let me tell you, that's not God. Get back on, on track, and it's all good. It's all good. We're going through this together. So also, if you have issues or you have any questions, post it in the group. We can get answers from everyone. All right, I love you all. Thank you for joining me.